RRR, or Rise, Roar, Revolt. It's a new 3-hour-long epic historical adventure film coming straight from India. Unusually from a film there, getting a limited theatrical release over here in Poland, and from what I hear in other Western countries as well. And since it is such a rare occurrence, I thought, what the hell, I'm gonna go check out what the fuss is about. And I have to say, I had a blast. It was such an amazing experience on so many different levels. Partly because the film was just genuinely good. Partly because it was such a different viewing experience from Western cinema. It was a huge adventure blockbuster that in one section becomes a competent rom-com, in another a brutal commentary on racism and British imperialism. In the climax it essentially becomes a superhero fight sequence, and there's also a moment in there where a tense scene about racism suddenly becomes a ridiculous dance-off sequence. There's like everything in this film. And on top of all of that, I saw it in a packed theater, with majority of the audience being actually Indian. So the reactions of the crowd only added to the excitement. Oh, and also, there's an intermission. This is the first time ever that a movie I saw in a theater had a literal break in the middle, so you could go get snacks or go to the bathroom, which is something that old, longer movies did regularly. And having now experienced it, I think it should be brought back for 3-hour films, like The Batman recently. All in all, I felt that seeing this film was like going to an amusement park in another country. Some things are weird and out of place, and you don't exactly know what's going on, but boy, did I have lots of fun. The story is a fictional tale about two people who really existed, two legendary figures from Indian history of the 20th century, and it imagines this crazy fairy tale scenario of what could have happened if they ever met. In the prologue, we see the British governor and his wife, who are these kind of cartoonish villains, essentially kidnap a little girl from her village because she can do pretty henna tattoos on people's hands. They take her away to live with them permanently in their large mansion in Delhi. One man from the tribe, Beam, gets sent to Delhi with a few helpers to try and find the girl and bring her back to her family. Meanwhile, the British military gets wind that someone might be coming for the girl, so they dispatch an extremely competent and ruthless policeman, who also happens to be a local man, an Indian man named Rama. They assign him the task of finding this mystery agent of the tribe and bring him to the authorities, dead or alive. And his motivation, at least as we initially know it, is that he's very driven, very motivated to be appreciated, to be promoted to a special officer rank. And to do so, he's absolutely not afraid to essentially betray his own countrymen and work against them. Now, here's the gist. The two guys accidentally meet and become very good friends, not knowing who the other is. Beam doesn't know that Rama is a policeman who's actually chasing him, and Rama doesn't know that Beam is the guy he's supposed to arrest. So they become very close with one another, but then inevitably the truth will come out at some point, and the open question is mainly, what will Rama do? Will he remain loyal to the British, or perhaps switch sides due to his loyalty to his new friend, who, by the way, proves his courage and integrity time and again? So, as I said at the beginning, we have over-the-top action sequences, dance-offs, singing, romantic subplots, an exploration of imperialism and the roots of Indian independence, and somehow it all manages to work. Now, I will say that there are things which are very, very weird for a Western viewer. The singing and dancing, obviously, the way that the action sometimes goes straight into superhero territory, other times invokes memories of the Chinese wuxia films with the fights on the wires and people flying around. And I would add to that the fact that a lot of the dialogue in the film seems dubbed later, which I'm not sure what that's about. Maybe it's the dialects or something, but it requires you to kind of get used to the fact that sometimes the sound doesn't exactly line up with the character's mouth movements. But if you can accept these things, the film is a fucking blast. The plot is quite interesting and manages to stay interesting. When the intermission rolled, I thought, okay, where do we go from here? The movie is mostly resolved. There's probably like one sequence left, but actually there was an hour and a half left. And it turns out it managed to keep a lot of surprises for the final act. The central conflict with Rama is quite compelling because once you understand fully where he's coming from, what drives him, what are his true motivations, it becomes much more of a difficult dilemma where you can justifiably see him go both ways. The chemistry between the leads is fantastic. They're also genuinely good actors, so much so that I was able to easily follow the plot, even though the subtitles in Polish were horrific. And I mean, even for the English dialogue, which should be easy to translate for us, and of which there's quite a lot in the film. I mean, very often there would be misgendered expressions, grammatical errors, mistranslations, sentences that don't make any sense. I think it's the worst subtitle job I've ever seen. It looked like something straight out of Google Translate, so I don't know who's responsible for that, but they need to be fired. And again, even though that was the case, I was able to fill the blanks easily and understand the movie completely. Also, the actors are very good at the physical stuff as well, and that goes both for dancing and fighting. And speaking of which, I think that many Western directors and stunt coordinators could watch this film and benefit and fucking learn. Because this is how you shoot action. Wide shots where you see everything clearly, no quick cuts to mask bad choreography. The action is just glorious to watch and clear as day. In general, the cinematography is very good. There were multiple times where I thought, where I admired a shot, but also occasions where I thought, okay, this shot is not like obviously great, but very well thought out in the symbolic sense, especially in the way it sometimes frames the characters in relation to one another. I also loved the fact that at the beginning, Beam is established as, as water and Rama as fire, symbolically. And you think, well, that's cool, but that's just a poetic way to contrast them. But then this actually comes back several times, quite literally, the motives of fire and water for each character, and in ways that always fit the scene and make sense with what's going on. Seriously impressive stuff. Then there's also the level of violence and brutality in the film. On the one hand, the physical violence, which doesn't pull back. There's torture, animals mauling people, blood, killing, all of it shown quite boldly. And on the other hand, there's also verbal violence, all the racist slurs and terrible shit that the British say to the Indians and about them. And it isn't at all sanitized, as you would expect it to be from a Western blockbuster. It's almost a cultural shock to see a movie which is clearly meant for wide audiences. It's not like an indie film, and still it speaks about some of these issues so directly. It is very refreshing, and I enjoyed that as well. Final thing to commend, I loved the score and the soundtrack. It uses a lot of traditional Indian music, including songs incorporated in the story, and it's pretty fire, I'm not gonna lie. It really helps build the atmosphere and the grandeur and the excitement. It is very loud and very bold, certainly a lively kind of soundtrack. And all things considered, I am surprised not just by how much I liked the film, but more so by how genuinely solid it is. The experience part is one thing, watching it with a theater full of people for whom it is more culturally relevant than for me certainly helped. But it's not like I think that the movie is a clown. It's a good clown show. It is over the top. It is ridiculous and sometimes weird, but it knows perfectly well what it's doing, and it's executed very, very competently. So if you have a chance, I mean seriously, just go check this one out. You will have a great time.